The first thing you notice is the silence. It's a silence that seems to stretch back in time, as if the world has paused to remember. The air is thick with it, hanging over the small, weathered house like a shroud. This is where it all began, where the boy who would become the king of rock and roll was born. But here in Tupelo, Mississippi, it's just a simple, two-room shack on the wrong side of the railroad tracks. The house is small, almost too small to believe that a legend could emerge from it. The walls are thin, the floorboards creak under your feet, and the furniture is basic, just a few pieces that look like they've been passed down through generations. A tiny bed in one room, a makeshift kitchen in the other, and a small living area where the family spent most of their time. It's hard to imagine that this was once home to Elvis Presley, the man who would go on to change the world. But it was here, in this humble place, that Elvis Aaron Presley was born on January 8, 1935. His parents, Vernon and Gladys, were struggling to make ends meet. Vernon was often out of work, and Gladys did whatever she could to keep the family afloat. They were poor, but they were a tight-knit family, and they had each other. Elvis's birth was a moment of joy in a life filled with hardship. He was the only one to survive. His twin brother, Jesse Garin, was stillborn. The loss weighed heavily on the family, but they found solace in each other and in the music that filled their home. Music was a constant presence, a way to escape the poverty and the struggles of everyday life. Elvis grew up listening to gospel, blues, and country, the sounds of the South that would shape his future. The house might be small, but it's full of stories. Stories of a young boy who would stand outside the local music store, nose pressed against the glass, dreaming of the day he could have his own guitar. Stories of a boy who sang in church, his voice soaring above the congregation, drawing attention and admiration. Stories of a boy who was shy and kind, but who had a spark of something special, something that set him apart from the other children. Today, the house stands as a testament to that young boy's journey. It's been moved from its original location, brick by brick, to a more prominent spot in the town. Surrounded by a park, it's now a place of pilgrimage for fans from all over the world. They come to see where it all began, to feel a connection to the man who became a legend. As you stand in the doorway, you can almost hear the echoes of Elvis's voice, singing those first gospel songs that would one day lead him to stardom. The silence is broken by the sound of a car pulling up outside. Two women, Sherry and Lois, step out, their faces lit up with excitement. They've come from 500 miles away, just to see this place. They've been fans for 40 years, and for them, this is more than just a visit, it's a ritual, a way to feel closer to the man they love. Sherry leads the way, her eyes darting around the room, taking in every detail. She points to the bed where Elvis once slept, the kitchen where his mother cooked, the living area where the family gathered. For her, this is a sacred space, a place where the magic of Elvis Presley began. As they leave, you can't help but feel a sense of awe. This small, simple house, with its creaky floorboards and thin walls, is the birthplace of a legend. It's a reminder that greatness can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that start in the smallest of homes. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, might have become a global icon, but to the people of Tupelo, Mississippi, he was still the boy next door. When he returned to Tupelo in 1956 and 1957, he brought with him not just fame, but a deep sense of community. He used his funds to buy back the swimming pool, ballpark, and a youth center, places that had been misused by others, but not everything went smoothly. Elvis had grand plans, like building a guitar-shaped swimming pool, but the funds were misappropriated, leaving his dreams unfulfilled. Those were special times, and everyone who was around then, or even pretended to be, had a story to tell. Robert Norris, a young policeman at the time, was tasked with supervising the fair where Elvis performed. He recalled the chaos that ensued when Elvis arrived at the fairground in a Cadillac escorted by sirens. The kids swarmed the car, and the show had to be postponed. Norris and the other officers struggled to manage the crowd, which grew so large that Governor J.R. Coleman had to call in the National Guard. Despite the chaos, Norris remembered the event fondly, especially the moment when a young girl named Julie Hopper managed to get on stage. Elvis whispered something to her, a moment that made headlines. Elvis's relationship with the police was unique. He was fascinated by law enforcement, and even became an honorary deputy later in life. But in those early days, his kindness and generosity were already evident. He often gave gifts to local people, even those who weren't his closest friends. Azalea Smith Moore, a childhood friend and psychologist, recalled how Elvis was kind to everyone, regardless of their background. She believed that his generosity stemmed from a deep sense of community and a desire to make a positive impact. Elvis's early life in Tupelo was marked by both joy and hardship. His family often struggled to make ends meet, and there were times when they lived in tiny, makeshift homes. Vernon, Elvis's father, had a history of financial troubles, which sometimes landed him in legal trouble. Despite these challenges, Elvis's mother, Gladys, was a constant source of love and support. She worked hard to provide for her son and instilled in him a strong sense of values. Azalea often wondered if Gladys's overprotective nature contributed to Elvis's later dependency on people like Colonel Parker, who managed his career. Elvis's childhood friends remember him fondly. Guy Thomas Harris, who called Elvis his little brother, shared stories of their close-knit community. They played together, explored the red clay hills, and even tried to string telephone wires from one house to another. Despite the poverty, they found joy in simple pleasures. Harris recalled how they would swap comic books and play in the creek, forming a bond that lasted for years. Tupelo was a town divided by the railroad tracks, with East Tupelo being home to the working class and the factory workers. The community was close, and everyone knew each other. Jimmy Galt, a classmate of Elvis, remembered him as a brilliant student with a gift for music. They would often play together in class, and Elvis's guitar playing was a highlight of their school days. Billy Welch, another friend, recalled picking cotton with Elvis to earn some money, a task that was both hard and rewarding. Elvis's early experiences in Tupelo shaped him in many ways. He learned the value of hard work, the importance of community, and the power of kindness. These qualities stayed with him throughout his life, even as he became a global superstar. To the people of Tupelo, he was always more than just a celebrity. He was a son of the town, a friend, and a symbol of their shared history. Elvis Presley's school days in Tupelo, Mississippi, weren't always smooth sailing. One day, Elvis got into a fight at school. Jimmy Galt, a close friend, remembered it vividly. The teacher came in, took Elvis and the other boy to the office, and the head asked who was going to go first. Everyone knew what that meant. They were both going to get a good hiding. The cries of both boys could be heard from outside, but most of the fun happened outside school. Jimmy Galt would ride his bike to Elvis's house, saxophone in hand, and stay over on Friday nights. Elvis's dad, Vernon, had a grocery delivery route, and Jimmy sometimes went along. They'd take the groceries to a place below Verona, and Elvis would tell Jimmy to get on the tailgate. Vernon would pitch up a case of cabbages, worried they'd go bad if they hit the floor. These were the little moments that made up their memories. Billy Welch, another friend, had big ideas. They thought about making money by picking plums, but they ended up eating all the plums before they could sell them. Gladys, Elvis's mom, was a good cook and a master of ghost stories. One night, after a particularly spooky tale, one of them started sleepwalking. Neither Jimmy nor Elvis could remember who it was, but they both found it funny. Despite the hard times, some of Elvis's classmates went on to become successful. Jimmy Galt recalled, "There were 7 millionaires and a billionaire out of a class of 120. Most of his classmates became regular factory workers, but a few made it big. One student set up a shirt factory and later bought a furniture factory." Elvis and Jimmy, however, were the lowriders, with just a pair of shoes and a couple of pants to their names. They were poor, but they didn't realize it at the time. The Great Depression and a tornado in 1936 made life even harder for their families. Many parents worked at places like the Millam Manufacturing Company or the Daybright Company. The town, despite its challenges, was forward-thinking and built a new hospital in 1935, which became a source of pride. Jimmy Galt's father worked in a sawmill, a peddling truck, a candy car, a Standard Oil truck, and finally a grocery store. Despite the hard work, there was a sense of community. Charlene Presley, Elvis's cousin, said, "They were so poor it was pathetic." But the people of Tupelo were proud of their local boy. Billy Welch said, "We were all thrilled to death when he made it." Elvis's talent for music was evident early on. He sang a lot, but it was natural because gospel music was a big part of their lives. On Sundays, they would go from house to house and sing. The most significant moment, though, was when Elvis got his first guitar. He really wanted a wagon, but it got destroyed, and the man who destroyed it paid him out. Elvis used the money to buy a guitar instead. He and his mother went to the Tupelo hardware store, where the manager, Howard Height, recalled the day. Elvis saw a rifle, but his mother wouldn't let him have it. Instead, a store employee named Forrest Bobo showed him a guitar. Elvis started playing it and said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll take it." That guitar became a part of his legacy. Gladys, Elvis's mother, was a strong influence. She was kind, generous, and loving, but also fierce. Life was tough, and the family often struggled with poverty. They cooked beans and greens, and Gladys made cornbread and bacon. Despite the hardships, they had a strong sense of community and faith. Elvis's first stage appearance in Tupelo was at a talent show sponsored by the Baker Company. He won 2 tickets to the show and performed Old Shep, even though the promoter, Charlie Bourne, had asked him not to. Roy Turner, a local historian, remembered the show vividly. Elvis had to climb on a stool to reach the microphone and sang a cappella. He was shy and gentle, a far cry from the rock and roll icon he would become. When Elvis returned to Tupelo in 1956, he was nervous about performing for his hometown. He wanted to make his parents proud and not disappoint the town. Roy Turner said he felt he was giving them a tremendous gift. The town was proud of him, and 80,000 people visit Tupelo every year because of Elvis. Elvis's childhood friend, Sam Bell, was black, and they did everything together. They played with BB guns and went to the movies at the Lyric Theater. They would sit in the aisle, defying the segregation laws. Sam remembered, "We were little boys and we played together." The owner of the theater was a kind man, and they managed to watch the movies without trouble. Elvis's early years in Tupelo shaped him into the icon he became. His friends, his family, and his community were all part of that journey. Despite the hard times, they had faith and a strong sense of belonging. Sam Bell and Ray Turner both remembered Elvis's love for Westerns, but it was more than just the movies that drew them together. Despite the racial tensions of the time, Elvis and Sam had a friendship that seemed to rise above the difficulties around them. Sam recalled, "It was a way of life. The relationship between black and white here in Tupelo wasn't bad. It got to be a problem later on. There were black and white signs, but if you needed water, you'd go into a white bathroom." They even went to the same drugstores, and Sam said, "We were too young for bars." This friendship extended to their love of music. Sam and Elvis would go to a black church that used to be a theater, just to listen to the gospel music. Sam remembered he wanted to be a gospel singer. Long back, he'd sing to a broom, pretending it was a guitar. We thought he was crazy. But Sam added, "Man, he played that broom all the way to the top." Elvis and Sam's bond was strong, and Sam's family welcomed Elvis like one of their own. He came in and used the fridge, whatever. Papa called him that boy, Sam said. The fridge was a big attraction, but for Elvis, the piano in the house was more interesting. He would sit and try to play, even though he couldn't really make music yet. The Lyric Theater was a meeting place for the youngsters of Tupelo, and it was there that Elvis and his friends, including James Osborne, would gather. "I used to cycle here, and Elvis would sit on my handlebars. We loved the same kind of cowboy films," James remembered. They would reenact the scenes they saw in the movies, using BB guns instead of real pistols. "You could kill a bird, but you wouldn't hurt anyone," Sam said. "We had a guy called Harold. Humpty Harold, we called him. Elvis and Harold didn't get along. Elvis shot a blackbird and said, 'I guess I'll go home now.' Johnny's Drive Inn was another place where Elvis and his friends would hang out. If we had a little money, we'd go up to Johnny's Drive Inn, just on the corner over yonder. He wanted a dough burger, a burger with meat mixed with dough, you know, biscuit dough," James recalled. The food was just a part of it. The real draw was the sense of camaraderie and the place where Elvis's love for burgers was born. At school, Elvis was a quiet, shy kid. Don Winders remembered, "He was a good kid but shy, quiet. I was outside, running, playing ball while he was inside, not outgoing, but he did like singing. I remember him singing Old Shep till I was tired of it. but I liked his recording of it. Azalea, who had known Elvis since they were toddlers, described him as disciplined. He would be under control, but the pressure cooker would sometimes explode. Despite the challenges, the Presleys always made sure Elvis had presents, even when they couldn't afford much. Christmas was a time for sacrifice for all our parents. Elvis was given the wagon as a sort of functional gift. It was something he could use to collect things from the grocery store, to carry coals, wood, etc. Elvis's uncle drove a yellow school bus full of black kids from the churches, and they would sing on the bus. It was common on Green Street, going up to where Elvis lived, for people to sing on front porches, Azalea remembered. Music was a big part of Elvis's life, and it was influenced by the gospel songs and the community around him. Elvis had a girlfriend named Ilwa Sandifer. She was sweet, Azalea recalled. She had freckles. I remember her father was a plumber. But Elvis was fickle, and eventually left her for a girl named Magdalene Morgan. Oh, he was romantic more so than most boys at the school. He never joined a violent gang. He was a quiet boy, except for playing music. He was shy. Despite his shyness, Elvis was not seen as a sissy. Azalea said, he did boy things like slipping off to go swimming, hunting. But he stayed away from the fights, which Don described as nonviolent. He was just introverted, Azalea explained. One of the standout teachers at the school was Miss Grimes. She would help all the pupils, the old students recalled. Elvis and the other dumber ones stayed near their teacher, i.e. Miss Grimes. She would have been drilling them at any time of the day. You'd get her drilling them in the shade, after class after recess, with multiplication tables. The school had a strong influence on the students and their parents. If the school were in a contest today to be the most effective, we would be very close to first for 3 reasons. Our parents knew education was an avenue to be personally responsible and financially secure. We were all religious kids. We were obedient, and the teachers all knew us, knew our parents, Azalea said. Elvis's impact at school was evident in the school plays. He had one line he had to recite, "My name is Fear. People tremble and shake when I am near." No one then knew just how he himself would shake. Don shared a story that really showed how small the town of Tupelo, Mississippi, was. In this place, everyone knew everyone, and mentioning a name left no doubt about who you were talking about. He used the story to highlight the influence of Miss Grimes, their teacher. She was a very smart lady, Winder said. One day, Wayne Stevenson was punching me with a pencil, and I kept jumping. Miss Grimes left the room but watched from outside. I beat the devil out of Wayne, and she let me do it. The whole class cheered, including Elvis. Shirley Gilentine, who was in the same class as Elvis, remembered those days well. We sang a lot. He sang Old Shep all the time. We also went to the fair and sang in a contest. He looked so disappointed when he didn't win. There's a picture of him with a look of disgust, like he couldn't believe he didn't win. Shirley and Elvis also sang together in the chapel. He was very shy, except when he was singing, she recalled. It was a surprise to see him become so famous later on. I used to smile when I heard about it, thinking of the little boy singing in the chapel. A lot of people didn't believe I was friends with Elvis, but I had a picture to prove it. James Osborne, who knew Elvis for about 3.5 years, had a different story. His brother, Mississippi Slim, was on the radio and went to Nashville to sing with Hank Williams. Elvis wanted to be on Slim's show. I asked Slim if he could do it, and Slim said sure if he's good. Elvis sang Old Shep and God Bless My Daddy. Slim said he needed more practice, but he let Elvis perform on the show later. Elvis also sang at the Assembly of God Church, and James's brothers taught him guitar chords. My brother said Elvis had a good voice but couldn't carry a tune, James recalled. After James returned from the Korean War, Elvis was already on his way up, and Slim apologized for not giving him more chances earlier. Elvis fell over the couch laughing. Jimmy Galt, another friend, remembered talking about music with Elvis. He wrote a 4-line song in our class. It went, "City Girl. She lives in a fine brick home, poor girl. She do the same but my girl. She lives in Tupelo County Jail, but it's a brick house all the same." Elvis brought his guitar to school, but he could only play once a week. Miss Grimes probably heard him strumming it. Azalea, who had a scholarly approach to her Elvis memories, shared a different side of Elvis. He was very generous, just like his uncle, Noah Presley. Noah would put 2 penny suckers in a sack for a penny. When Elvis became famous, he didn't forget those who were kind to him. He had a lot of respect for his elders in Tupelo, and I think that's why he felt a strong connection to Colonel Parker. Bill Kynard opened the Elvis Museum in Tupelo, but it wasn't easy. We weren't popular. When we got here, someone offered us $2 million to leave. My wife said no. He then said he'd run us out with dogs, chainsaws, and shotguns. My wife from Kentucky said, "Bring it on. We'll be needing our cemetery sooner or later." They sued the city after it stole their dirt for another building, winning $125,000, but spending $200,000 on repairs. The museum had a granite wall with the names of Elvis fans, like a miniature version of the Vietnam Memorial. Fans paid $100 to have their names sandblasted on the wall. Some were given as gifts. J.D. Sumner's name was paid for by a fan, and there's Joyce Logan, who wanted her name here but not on a gravestone. Rosemary Reynolds is English, and Bill Williams was the mayor of Saltillo. Mary Jenkins was Elvis's cook, and Patsy Anderson worked at Graceland for 22 years. Linda, Bill's wife, loved Elvis and his songs. He bought groceries and medicines for people. He did many kind deeds. His songs will sound in my ears until the day I die. Charlie Watts, a radio broadcaster, interviewed Elvis and his parents when Elvis came back to Tupelo in the 1950s. Mrs. Presley dominated the conversation. They were very proud of him. They had a parade through Tupelo that day. Julie Hopper, a young girl, forced her way onto the platform where Elvis was singing. She wanted to get Elvis, and they promised to take her backstage, which they did. RCA released the interview on an LP, but removed Charlie's voice and didn't credit him. Elvis would never have allowed that. It was a great interview. He was very humble. Elvis loved guns, and would often wear a police uniform when he visited Tupelo. Robert Norris, a retired policeman, made Elvis an honorary deputy. Elvis was obsessed with the police and would come in at night. We made him an honorary deputy. He had a thing about being a policeman. Steve Holland, a local assemblyman, knew everything about Tupelo. Elvis was proud of his birthright. Had he lived longer, he might have had more opportunities, but we were one of the first towns to mix agriculture with industry, and we are prosperous now. Without Elvis, we wouldn't get the traffic we get here. We want people to spend more time here, the same as they spend in Graceland. Steve Holland, a local organ player in Tupelo, Mississippi, had a dream. He wanted to turn Tupelo into an Elvis Presley village, a place where fans from all over the world could come to celebrate the life and music of the king. But there was a problem. The state of Mississippi, according to Holland, had never invested a single dollar in Tupelo to make this dream a reality. He believed that with the right funding, Tupelo could attract tourists just like Memphis did. Holland was passionate about Elvis and Tupelo, and he felt that the town had the potential to become a major tourist destination if given the chance. Holland wasn't just a dreamer, he was also a musician. He often played the organ at local civic events and Elvis-themed functions. When he talked about Elvis, it was from the heart. He believed that if Elvis had lived longer, he would have become more than just a musical icon. Holland thought Elvis could have become a powerful spokesman for the South, even a political figure like Ronald Reagan or Sonny Bono. He had studied the Presley family history and knew that they were adventurous and forward-thinking people. He believed Elvis would have used his influence to make the South a better place. Linda Oliff, the sales director at the Tupelo Convention and Visitors Bureau, shared Holland's enthusiasm for Elvis. She took me to the local courthouse, a place that held a special place in Elvis's story. It was here, on the manicured lawns, that Elvis performed at one of the Saturday jamborees. The event was hosted by Mississippi Slim, a local radio personality who introduced various acts. When Slim introduced Elvis, the young singer was nervous and almost backed out, but he decided to go on, and the rest, as they say, is history. Mississippi Slim's star was eclipsed that day, and Elvis's rise to fame began. Elvis's connection to Tupelo was strong, and the town embraced him as their favorite son. However, there was a bittersweet part of the story. In 1948, the Presley family left Tupelo for Memphis, Tennessee. This was a part of history that Tupelo seemed to want to forget. To the locals, anything Elvis did outside Tupelo was just an afterthought. They preferred to focus on his roots and the impact he had on their town. One of the most touching aspects of Elvis's life in Tupelo was his connection to his stillborn twin brother, Jesse. Charlene Presley, Elvis's cousin, took me to the Priceville Memorial Garden, where Elvis would visit at night to pay his respects to Jesse. The grave was unmarked, and the exact location was a mystery, but it was clear that Elvis never forgot about his twin. The poverty that marked the area was evident in the unmarked graves, a stark reminder of the hard times the Presley family had faced. Susie Dent, from the Northeast Mississippi Historical and Genealogical Society, summed up the relationship between Elvis and Tupelo beautifully. When Elvis left here, he took some of Tupelo with him. Things stick in your heart and soul. Elvis's journey from Tupelo to Memphis was a pivotal moment in his life, and it was the beginning of his transformation into a global superstar. Elvis's move to Memphis was a turning point. Memphis was a city that embraced the spirit of rock and roll, much like New Orleans did for jazz. When the Presleys arrived in 1948, rock and roll was still in its infancy, but Memphis was a place where the sound was evolving. The city was a melting pot of blues, country, and gospel, and Elvis fit right in. He quickly became a part of the Memphis music scene, and the city embraced him with open arms. In Memphis, Elvis attended Humes High School, where he continued to develop his musical talents. Old friends and classmates like Gene Bradbury remembered Elvis as a quiet, unassuming, and friendly guy. He stood out with his long hair and fancy shirts, which were not the norm at the time. Bradbury recalled Elvis performing at school variety shows, singing ballads like Old Shep. Elvis's performances were a hit, and he quickly became a favorite among his peers. Elvis wasn't without his challenges, though. Some of the football players at Humes made fun of his hair, but he had a protector in Red West. Red, a tough and athletic student, threatened anyone who tried to bully Elvis. This friendship would later extend into Elvis's professional life, with Red becoming one of his closest bodyguards. Elvis's time at Humes was just the beginning of his journey to stardom. The school was a place where he honed his skills and found his voice. His performances at school events and his unique style set him apart from his classmates. Even in the early days, it was clear that Elvis was destined for greatness. The impact of Elvis on Memphis was profound. The city is now known as the home of rock and roll, and Elvis Presley Boulevard is a testament to his legacy. Memphis never stopped thanking Elvis for bringing his talent and energy to the city. The music, the memories, and the spirit of Elvis are still alive in Memphis, just as they are in Tupelo. Both cities are proud of their connection to the king, and they continue to celebrate his life and music in their own unique ways. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had a life that was far from royal in his early days. Before he became a global icon, he was just a kid from a small town, and then a teenager in Memphis, Tennessee. One of his high school classmates, Jimmy Angel, had a career path that paralleled Elvis's in many ways. Jimmy sang with Elvis on records, just as he had with other big names like Gene Vincent and Buddy Holly. He released his own hit, Teenager in Love, and followed what he called the Presley Code, being nice, not causing trouble, and treating everyone with respect. Jimmy remembered Humes High School as a tough place, especially for black students who often faced discrimination. You could get your head handed to you, he said, but Elvis stood out even then. He looked like a pimp, Jimmy recalled, noting Elvis's distinctive style and his love for Hank Williams's music. Despite the challenges, Elvis found friends who shared his passions, and those friendships lasted a lifetime. One of Elvis's closest friends from Humes was George Klein, who became the unofficial leader of the Memphis Mafia. George was the president of their class, and he and Elvis bonded over music. We were going to do Christmas carols, and Elvis asked if he could bring his guitar and sing, George remembered. It wasn't cool to do that in 1948, but he was just that kind of guy. He won the senior class talent show, and I wondered if he'd go anywhere in music. Elvis's family moved to Memphis from Tupelo when he was a teenager, and adapting to the big city wasn't easy. They were very poor, and Elvis had to adjust to the strict rules and larger size of Humes High School. He was a quiet guy in high school, George said. We called him the Velvet Hammer. He wore black pants with a white stripe and a black sport coat with the collar turned up. His hair was longer than the Beatles would be, and he was making a statement with his style. Despite the challenges, Elvis thrived in Memphis. He found a sense of community at Lauderdale Courts, the public housing project where his family lived. The Presleys' apartment became a gathering place for friends, and Elvis often hosted parties there. "If you go shopping today, you drive 15 miles to a mall," Neil Niker, a former resident, said. "But from here, then, you could walk for a few minutes and find everything you wanted. Our whole world was a mile wide. We fought together, we loved each other, and we had plenty of exercise." Elvis's love for music and performing was evident early on. He would often sing and play guitar for his friends. It didn't take long to understand that Elvis Presley had a good voice, Buzzy Forbes, another resident, recalled. He was always trying to impress an audience, even when he was just a kid. Elvis's ambitions didn't go unnoticed. Some of his classmates, like Gene Bradbury and Fred Frederick, remembered when Elvis wanted to be a policeman. "He just liked the police," Fred said. He became a friend of Bill Morris, a local sheriff. This friendship would later prove valuable as Elvis's career took off. Elvis's humble beginnings at Lauderdale Courts were a far cry from the luxurious life he would lead as a superstar, but the memories of those days remained with him. "Elvis used to drive people by here and say he used to live here," a guide at the now museum-like apartment said. He wasn't ashamed of having been in public housing. For many of Elvis's fans, visiting his old home is a pilgrimage. The rooms where the Presleys lived are preserved, and fans come to see the settee, the old radio, and the bedrooms, as if they can somehow connect with the young Elvis who once lived there. "They see their Elvis here," the guide explained. To some of them, the rooms have healing properties. Elvis's time at Lauderdale Courts was a formative period, shaping the man he would become. The friends he made there, the community that supported him, and the experiences he had all played a role in his journey to stardom. Even as he became famous, Elvis never forgot his roots or the people who knew him best. Elvis Presley's journey from the humble Lauderdale Courts to becoming the king of rock and roll is a tale of dreams, hard work, and the unwavering support of friends. One of the most enduring friendships in Elvis's life was with the Lanskys, the family who owned a small menswear store in Memphis. Bernard Lansky and his son Hal became more than just shopkeepers to Elvis. They were his confidants and a constant presence in his life. Bernard Lansky, a man with a thick Southern accent and a heart as big as the Mississippi, opened his doors to young Elvis long before he was a star. The store, originally located on Beale Street, was a place where Elvis would stand outside, pressing his nose against the window, dreaming of the day he could afford the stylish clothes inside. When Elvis finally mustered the courage to enter the store, Bernard saw something special in him and offered to help. The first item Elvis bought was a white tuxedo for his high school prom, a purchase that marked the beginning of a lifelong relationship. As Elvis's fame grew, so did his connection to Lanskys. The store became a second home, and the Lanskys were more than happy to cater to his every need. They provided him with the flamboyant outfits that became his signature style, from the psychedelic jumpsuits to the classic blue suede shoes. Each piece of clothing was a testament to the bond they shared, and the trust Elvis had in their fashion sense. But the Lanskys' role went beyond just selling clothes. They were a source of comfort and advice, always there to listen and support Elvis through the highs and lows of his career. Bernard and Hal took pride in being part of Elvis's life, and they were proud to call him a friend. The store's walls are adorned with guitars signed by Elvis and other music legends, a visual reminder of the connections they've made over the years. Today, Lanskys has moved to a more upscale location in the Peabody Hotel, but the spirit of the place remains the same. The deep carpets and the air of quality are a far cry from the simple days of Elvis's youth, but the Lanskys ensure that the heart of the store is still rooted in the memories of their most famous customer. Visitors can take home a piece of Elvis's legacy, whether it's a jumpsuit or a pair of blue suede shoes, all labeled with the proud claim, "Clo, here's to the king." Elvis's connection to the Lanskys is a reminder that behind every great story of success are the people who believe in you and stand by you. The Lanskys were more than just shopkeepers. They were a part of Elvis's journey, a testament to the power of friendship and the importance of staying true to one's roots. As the world remembers Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, it also remembers the Lanskys, the family who helped him dress the part and supported him every step of the way.